The emergency alert came through at 11:47 on Tuesday night. My phone vibrated so loudly against the bedside table that I woke up thinking someone was calling me. Instead, there was a notification covering half the screen. Public safety notice. Residents experiencing numbness, involuntary movement, disruptive sleep, or unusual repetitive behavior should remain indoors and await further guidance. Do not restrain affected limbs. I read it twice before taking a screenshot and sending it to the family group chat. Dad replied first. "What sort of warning is that?" Mom sent a laughing emoji a few seconds later. They were both downstairs watching TV, so I got out of bed and went to show them, even though they had obviously received the same alert. Dad was standing in the kitchen with his phone in one hand while Mom was sitting under a blanket at the end of the sofa. "Someone's hacked the emergency alert system," Dad said. "There'll be an apology by morning." "Why would it tell people not to restrain their limbs?" I asked. He looked down at the message again. "Maybe everyone's arms are about to revolt." Mom laughed and reached towards the packet of biscuits on the coffee table. "Mine already has." Dad told her not to encourage it. We joked about it for another minute, but there was nothing about the alert on the news. Online, people were posting screenshots and making the same sort of jokes. A few claimed it had only been sent to certain parts of the city, while others said it was probably meant for a hospital and had somehow gone out to the public by mistake. There were no sirens outside, no police cars, nothing that made it feel like an actual emergency. By 12:30, I had stopped thinking about it. When I woke up, I had 3 missed calls from my friend Danny and more than 20 unread messages. I didn't check them straight away because I could hear the news downstairs, much louder than usual. As I reached the bottom step, the presenter was saying that emergency services were investigating reports of a possible neurological condition. Mom and Dad were sitting together on the sofa, staring at the TV without speaking. A reporter stood outside a hospital surrounded by ambulances. She explained that hundreds of people had been admitted overnight after experiencing numbness, muscle spasms, and temporary loss of control in one or more limbs. Officials believed the condition usually began in a hand or arm before spreading to the rest of the body. Footage appeared beside her of a man being guided towards an ambulance by 2 paramedics. He looked frightened, but otherwise normal, until his right arm suddenly swung backwards and grabbed one of them by the face shield. The man immediately began apologizing. "That wasn't me," he kept saying. "I didn't do that." The footage cut away before the paramedic managed to free himself. The reporter went on to say that those affected remained conscious during these episodes. In more advanced cases, the condition could interfere with balance, speech, and voluntary movement, although officials stressed that the symptoms were temporary and that specialist teams were being sent to affected neighborhoods. "Guess it wasn't a prank," I said. Neither of my parents answered. Dad's right hand was resting on his knee, opening and closing in a steady rhythm. His fingers curled into a fist, relaxed, then curled again. It didn't look like a nervous habit. It was too even for that, almost as though the hand was testing how each finger worked. "Dad?" The movement stopped abruptly. He looked down and rubbed his palm against his jeans. "Pins and needles." Mom was holding a mug in one hand and stirring it with a teaspoon, but there was nothing inside it. The spoon scraped round and round against the ceramic, making a clinking, irritating sound. "There's nothing in your cup," I said, confused. She glanced down as though she had only just noticed. For a moment, the stirring stopped. Then her hand began moving again. "Mom?" "I know," she strained. The reporter warned viewers to avoid unnecessary travel. A second later, Mom repeated. Avoid unnecessary travel. She said it in the same rhythm as the reporter, only quieter. Dad turned towards her. Mom looked at him, and then they both turned towards me at exactly the same time. The movement was so sudden and so perfectly matched that I stepped backwards in surprise. What? Mom asked. Nothing. Dad's hand began opening and closing again. I asked whether either of them felt numb, but they both said no. They answered together, the word leaving their mouths at the same time. Dad laughed afterwards, but it sounded forced. It was all weirding me out, so I told them I was going upstairs to check my messages. Danny had sent me several videos. The first showed a woman sitting on her kitchen floor, while her left hand repeatedly reached for the front door. She had wrapped her other arm around the wrist and was using her whole body to drag it back. But each time she loosened her grip, the hand stretched towards the lock again. The person filming kept telling not to restrain it. The next video had already been removed by the time I tried to view it. The third showed a man sitting beside a laptop while his hand typed without him looking at the screen. He was crying and insisting that he wasn't controlling it. The hand had filled the page with the same 3 words. Let them in. Danny's final message said her brother had started doing it too. One hand had opened their back door while the other tried to pull it shut. I called her, but the call went straight to voicemail. The government website described it as a temporary neuromuscular condition. It said symptoms usually begin in a single limb and could later affect speech, balance, and movement. Those affected might experience brief periods in which they were unable to control part of their body, but loss of consciousness was uncommon. It also said that there was no evidence of person-to-person transmission. The social media posts were less reassuring. People claimed the episodes became longer as the condition progressed. At first, a hand might move for a few seconds. Later, an entire arm could act independently. After that, people began repeating words they had heard, speaking in unfamiliar tones, or walking somewhere without choosing to. Most of them remained aware throughout. Another account described it as a parasite, although no one seemed to know where that information had come from. According to the post, it entered the nervous system and spread slowly, using the body in short bursts while it learned how everything worked. The stronger it became, the longer those periods lasted. Eventually, the person underneath was only given control back for a few seconds at a time. It almost always began in the non-dominant hand. I'm right-handed. My left hand was resting beside the laptop while I scrolled through posts and articles. I tried to lift it. Nothing happened. I could feel every finger pressed firmly against the desk. There was no numbness or pain. My arm simply did not respond. Before I had time to panic properly, the hand moved on its own. It slid across the trackpad, guided the cursor towards the corner of the screen, and closed the browser. I stared at it. A few seconds later, control returned so suddenly that I jerked my arm against the edge of the desk. I flexed my fingers, lifted my hand, and turned it over several times. Everything felt normal again. I tried convincing myself it had been a spasm. I had been sitting awkwardly, and after watching those videos, I was looking for something to be wrong. Then I reopened the laptop and realized my search history had been cleared as well. A white van pulled up outside. It had no markings apart from a small blue symbol near the back doors. 3 people climbed out wearing white protective clothing and clear face shields before walking towards the house across the road. Mr. and Mrs. Ellis had lived here for as long as I could remember. Mr. Ellis opened the door and his wife stood beside him with one arm held tightly against her body. Even from my window, I could see her hand twisting and reaching towards the workers. She kept pulling it back, but each time she did, the hand stretched out again. The workers restrained her and began guiding her towards the van. Mrs. Ellis shouted that she was still herself and that it was only controlling her arm. She sounded embarrassed at first, like she was trying to explain some strange accident. But when they opened the rear doors and she saw inside, she began to scream. There were already people in the van. Some were sitting quietly, others had been strapped to the seats. One man pressed his face between them and shouted that he could prove he was still conscious if they would only ask him questions. His body was thrashing against the restraints, but his voice sounded completely normal. Mrs. Ellis' left arm reached towards the nearest worker, while the rest of her body twisted away. "I'm not doing that," she shouted. "Please, I'm not doing that." The doors shut behind her. I heard a knock on my door, and I jumped away from the window. "Open the door," Dad said. His voice sounded normal. "We need to talk." I moved closer, but left the door locked. "Are you alright?" "Of course I am." From somewhere behind him, Mom repeated, "Of course I am." She used exactly the same tone. Dad was silent for a few seconds before lowering his voice. "They're checking houses. We should tell them about your mother." "What about Mom?" There was a pause. Then Mom said, "What about Mom?" I could hear the teaspoon scraping against the empty mug again. I told Dad that he was acting strangely too. After a few seconds, they walked away from the door, their footsteps moving down the corridor at the same pace. Another video appeared online. It had been filmed from inside one of the vans and showed a woman whispering into her phone while people cried around her. She said the medical teams were not taking everyone to hospitals. The infected were being separated according to how far the condition had progressed. Some could still fight it. Some lost control for several minutes at a time. Others only seemed to gain control for a few seconds. The woman turned the camera towards a teenage boy sitting opposite her. He appeared calm, with both hands resting on his knees. "He came in with his family," the woman whispered. "They said he passed the first test." The boy looked directly at the camera. His left hand lifted one finger to his lips, while the rest of him remained completely still. The video ended there. A government warning appeared at the top of the page, stating that unverified claims about parasitic infection and permanent loss of control were spreading online. It urged people to trust official guidance and cooperate with medical workers. My left hand started moving towards the laptop. I caught my wrist with my right hand. The fingers twitched against my grip, pulling towards the keyboard. I held on, remembering the alert's warning not to restrain affected limbs. I had assumed that part was to stop people hurting themselves, but now I wondered whether there was another reason. For a few seconds, my hand fought me. Then it stopped. Control returned, but only after the page had disappeared from the screen. Someone knocked on the front door downstairs. "Medical assistance," a voice called. "We're carrying out household checks." Mom answered immediately. "Coming." I ran out of my room. Dad was standing in the hallway with his right hand on the lock. Mom stood beside him, staring towards the door. Her lips were moving silently, forming the words as the person outside. I told them not to open it. Dad looked at me. "We have to." "No, we don't." "They're helping people." Mom repeated the sentence a moment later, her voice flat. Dad's hand turned the lock, and his expression changed immediately. He looked down at his fingers as though he had only just realized what they were doing. "No," he whispered. His hand pulled the door open, and the workers entered quickly. Dad tried to move backwards, but his arm reached towards one of them instead. Mom's left hand grabbed hold of a worker's sleeve, while the rest of her body pulled away so hard that she nearly fell. She stared at her own fingers in horror. "I'm not doing that," she said. One of the workers sprayed something on her wrist. Her hand loosened and they moved in before either of my parents could resist again. Dad shouted that he was fine and demanded that they ask him questions. Mom kept telling me she was still herself. Halfway through the sentence, her voice changed. "Still myself," she repeated. "Still myself, still myself." The words came out in the same tone each time, even while tears streamed down her face. Then, just as quickly, she seemed to regain control. "Please," she cried, "don't let them take you as well." The workers pulled them outside. I remained near the stairs with my left hand hidden inside the pocket of my hoodie. One worker stayed behind to speak to me. She wore a clear face shield, and I could see her eyes properly. "Is there anyone else in the property?" she asked. I told her no. "Have you experienced any symptoms?" My hand was completely still inside my pocket. "No." "Any numbness or involuntary movement?" "No." "Difficulty speaking or repeating things without meaning to?" "No." She watched me for a few seconds before asking me to show her both hands. My right hand came out first. Then I slowly removed the left. I expected it to reach towards her. I expected the fingers to twist or jerk, or for the hand to expose me in some obvious way. Instead, it hung loosely at my side. She asked me to turn my hands over, spread my fingers, and touch each fingertip to my thumb. Both hands obeyed perfectly. The worker's shoulders relaxed. She checked my pupils and asked me more questions. I answered all of them without hesitating. Outside, my parents were being loaded into the van. Mom saw me through the open doorway and shouted that I shouldn't let them take me. Her hand struck the side of the vehicle while she tried to pull it away. The worker told me I appeared unaffected. "You'll need to remain inside for now," she said. "Residents without symptoms may be relocated later today while the area is cleared." I asked where we would be taken. "A temporary safe center." I opened my mouth to tell her the truth then, but my left hand pressed its nails into my palm before the words could leave my throat. After the worker left, I locked the door behind her and stood alone in the hallway. My left hand remained completely still, even after the van pulled away with my parents inside. That frightened me more than anything it had done before. A new alert appeared on my phone shortly afterwards. Evacuation notice. Residents without symptoms should prepare one small bag and wait for authorized transport. Do not leave your property until instructed. As soon as I read it, my hand took control. It pulled out my backpack and packed my charger, a clean shirt, and my toothbrush. When I saw the workers moving further down the street, it picked up my coat. By the time they returned for me, it had gone still again. They tested me again before letting me onto the bus. I walked in a straight line, followed a series of simple instructions, and held both hands out in front of me while they watched for movement. My body obeyed perfectly. There were around 30 people traveling to the safe center with me, and every one of them had passed the same checks. They brought us to a school on the other side of the city and gave us green wristbands before assigning us beds in the auditorium. That was yesterday. I've been writing this in pieces ever since because I wanted someone to know that my parents were still conscious when they were taken. Even when their bodies moved without them, they were still in there. I thought my infection was weaker because it only controlled me for a few seconds at a time. Now I understand that it was being careful. It knew when the worker was testing me, and it packed my back because it wanted to come here. There are hundreds of people in the auditorium, all wearing green wristbands. A woman near me has been tapping 4 times against her bed frame, pausing, then doing it again. The man beside her has started copying her, and now I can hear the same tapping from the other side of the room. Whenever a worker passes, it stops. An announcement has just come over the speakers, telling us the facility is secure. A woman near the doors repeated it in exactly the same voice. Then a man near the back did the same. More people are sitting up now, all turning towards the doors. My left hand stopped trying to close this page. It is resting calmly beside the keyboard now. I thought it hit because it was afraid of being caught. I was wrong. It knew this was where they were bringing everyone who could still pass as unaffected. I was in 3rd grade, sitting in the cafeteria when I died for the first time. Deathly allergic to peanuts, surrounded by 9-year-olds, left barely supervised with a room full of lunch trays and chaos. You know how it goes. I don't remember eating it. I don't even remember what it tasted like. Just a sudden awful stillness. I couldn't breathe. I hit the floor. People were screaming. And then, nothing. It went silent in the room. My eyes were locked on the tiled ceiling, white, sterile, humming with flickering fluorescence. I couldn't look away, couldn't move, couldn't even blink. It felt like everyone else had disappeared. I lay there for what felt like hours, unable to make a sound other than low grunts and wheezes. I was unable to move a single part of my body, no matter how hard I tried. Even my fingers and toes were locked into place. I remember wishing to die. I wished to drift off to heaven and be with my old dog again, to move, to speak, to be free. It's a terrible thing how easily a child can come to terms with death. That's when he spoke. "You are already dead." I felt warm breath on my left ear. Someone was lying next to me, close enough for my skin to prickle, my hair to stand on end. "Do you recognize my voice?" I did. It was mine. I still couldn't move. My body spasmed in tiny bursts, every nerve screaming. I think I peed myself. I tried to scream, to cry, to do anything. There was a choked, childish sound, like someone trying hard to stay in character. All right, he said, stifling laughter. "I'll cut to the chase. This is it. This is all there is." He paused, as if savoring it. "Maybe not here, in this lunchroom forever. But really, this is it." He leaned in closer. I could feel his smile, even if I couldn't see it. "You'll always want to speak, but no one will ever hear you. No one will ever see you. Your own personal hell, I guess." Dread spread through every part of my body. "However," he continued after a few long moments of silence, "I have a proposition for you." I didn't even know what proposition meant, but I had no choice but to continue listening. "I can keep you here, not in this moment, but in this life. You'll grow up, have birthdays, play with your friends, pretend this never happened." There was a long silence. I felt dizzy. "On one condition," he finally spoke. "When the time comes, I will come back, and you will have to give me an answer to my question." Another silence stretched thin and eternal. Why was everything moving so slowly? I can't be dead. I feel mostly conscious. Why couldn't I speak? Why couldn't I move? Suddenly, there was another voice, one from further away, maybe from the corner of the room. It was familiar, but it was older, more mature. It was low and quiet, but I heard it. Say no. Then came my voice again, calm, cold. You will have 3 seconds to speak. Say yes, and you will wake up. Say no, and you may stay dead. Yes, I shouted the second I could feel my throat clear. Sound came rushing back like a crashing wave. Chatter, trays clattering, footsteps echoing off tile. I sat up with a gasp, sobbing, clawing at the air like I needed to prove I was real. I needed to feel something, anything. All around me, kids stared, forks paused halfway to mouths, eyes wide. No one moved. What happened? I asked anybody who would answer me. A girl in my class blinked. Dude, you tell us. We were just eating and you fell backwards in your chair. Your eyes were closed for like 5 seconds. Then you shut back up, all scared. You should probably go to the nurse. You hit your head pretty bad. No mention of peanuts. No mention of death. No mention of the hours and hours it felt like I was glued to the floor. I must have dreamt it all. I made my way to the nurse's office. She called my mom to pick me up and take me to the ER to check for a concussion. And a concussion I did indeed have. I never mentioned my run-in with my imaginary doppelganger. No one would have believed me if I had. That is, until today. It's been 13 years now, and I've started to see him. For context, the past 13 years of my life have been hellish to say the least. I don't remember much from my childhood. Only my parents fighting, divorce, and poverty. The week I turned 18, I moved out of my mother's house and into my own flat. I dropped out of high school when I was 16 and worked 2 shitty part-time service jobs. I never spent a dime on anything other than gas and the occasional McDonald's meal. I saved up enough for a year's rent on my apartment. I was so convinced that getting away would cure me. I would blossom in the real world. I would thrive on my own. I would create my own family. I would be happy. Every so-called real job I applied for turned me down. Every friendship or relationship cracked and fell apart before it even started. It all should have been a sign. I should have remembered what happened to me when I was 9. I should have carried that memory like a warning. But I didn't. About a year ago, I finally fell in love. I remember thinking, the only time I truly feel happy is when I'm with her. And it was true. When she came over, the apartment felt warmer. I felt warmer. There was this quiet hum in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Like I was a person again. Then, one night, she showed up in tears. Eyes puffy, shoulders tense. I felt that warmth drain from my body like blood from a wound. What's wrong? I asked. You cheater! She screamed, shoving her phone into my face. On the screen was a video of me kissing another girl in a packed bar. I grabbed the phone with shaking hands. I've never even been to this bar. I've never seen that girl in my life. I love you. I pleaded, desperate. She didn't blink. Are you really going to stand there and tell me that isn't you? She snapped, jabbing a finger at the video playing on her screen. There I was, same face, same hair, same clothes, same stupid little scar on my chin. It was me. But I had no memory of this. None. No, I wouldn't let myself spiral. I refused to gaslight myself. I may have been a heavy drinker, but not a blackout cheater. This wasn't me. It couldn't be. That's not me, I said softly. She stared at me like she was looking at a stranger. Fuck you. That was the last thing she ever said to me. She left, slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. She never came back for her stuff. Not the spare hoodie in my closet, not her pajamas in the hamper, not even her toothbrush still drying quietly by the sink like it didn't know she was gone. I thought that was rock bottom. But it was only the beginning. After a few weeks of failing to pick myself up and get back to my life, I finally just got up and drove to my mom's. I didn't speak to her very often, to no fault of her own. I just didn't ever feel like talking to anyone. I felt like a burden on this world. My mom was happy to see me. She hugged me longer than usual and insisted I stay for a few nights. She made dinner every evening. We watched old movies, played cards like we used to. And for a brief moment, it felt like something close to peace. We had a beautiful, quiet little weekend together. The night before I planned to head back to my apartment, she turned to me on the couch and smiled. "I'm really glad we've started doing this every month," she said. "It's brought me so much peace." I blinked. That didn't make sense. This was the first time I'd visited her in over a year. Not because we were estranged. It was just hard, emotionally, financially, and I'd never brought anyone with me. Not once. My first instinct was worry. Maybe she was getting older. Maybe this was early dementia creeping in. "What do you mean, Mom? I haven't been here in a long time." I tried to keep my voice gentle. "But I think we should start doing this every month." She gave me a strange look. Half confusion, half concern. "What are you talking about?" she said slowly. "You were here just a few weeks ago with that blonde girl. You invited her for dinner. You even showed me the ring you said you were gonna propose with." She watched me closely now. There was no sarcasm in her voice, no trace of forgetfulness or confusion in her eyes. Just steady maternal concern. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked. And I didn't know what to say. "Oh, yeah, my bad," I said. I quickly got my stuff together and left. These coincidences have now been happening for 2 years. A Facebook account under my name filled with photos I've never taken, pictures of me smiling with strangers I don't recognize, at restaurants I've never been to, in cities I've never visited, captions written in my voice but using words I'd never use, inside jokes with people I've never met, birthday posts from people I don't know, calling me things I've never been called. And it's not just online. People at gas stations or grocery stores greet me like we've been friends for years. "Hey, good to see you again. How was the trip? You and that girl still together?" They smile like they know me, but I've never seen their faces before in my life. When the time comes, I will come back, and you will have to give me an answer to my question. The sentence rang over and over again in my head. It felt like a dream, like words I'd never heard. Why was this sentence consuming my every thought? Why do they torment me? Why do they hurt? Those words scrambled my mind for months. Months where I barely left my apartment, barely spoke to a single soul. Just me lying in bed, begging for death with a dry mouth and an empty stomach. I stopped eating, stopped drinking. When I did go outside, I wouldn't look before crossing the road, hoping deep down that something would end it for me. But I never died. Every time I caved, I ran from the oncoming headlights. I took a sip of water when my vision blurred. I forced down food when my chest started to tighten. It was like I was trapped in a body that refused to quit, a corpse pretending to live. I was dragging a dead soul through each day, and I couldn't stop myself. That's when I came to the decision I'd have to just get it out of the way. I went on a short walk around my neighborhood the night I was going to do it. The night I was going to end it all, once and for all. I touched the trees and breathed in the cold night air, felt rain on my skin. I walked back to my apartment in a daze. Every step felt wrong, like the air itself was pushing back against me. Something deep inside me was screaming, "Do not open your door. Do not open your door. Do not open your door." So I didn't. I stood there, frozen in the hallway, key trembling in my hand. And then, the door opened on its own. But not by chance. Someone was already inside. There, I was standing in the doorway. Same face, same clothes, same expression I thought I was wearing. It was me, staring out at me, from inside my apartment while I stood helplessly outside. Soft jazz music played from inside. It smelled like steak and red wine, like money, like luxury, everything I'd never had. The other me looked directly into my eyes with a smile spread across his face. I waited for him to speak, as he waited for me too. I finally caved. "You," was all I got before he cut me off suddenly. "I told you I'd come back for you, buddy," he said through a grin. "Are you ready to answer my question?" I was speechless. What was I supposed to say? How was I supposed to process this? I had just come to terms with death. Why must I come to terms with anything else? I stood there, stunned, every part of me locking up. My throat tightened. Words died in my mouth. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. The jazz music faded out, swallowed by the silence like it had never existed. Only this time, in the stillness, I could see him, clear as day. "Let me repeat myself," he said. "Are you ready to answer my question?" I nodded my head to the best of my ability. I didn't want to. It just felt like I had to. Like there was no getting out of this. A slow smile crept across his face. He leaned in, so close our noses almost touched. I could feel his breath against my lips. Was it worth it? The only words I could croak out were weak, fractured. At least, I lived." He paused like he was genuinely considering it. Then suddenly, he burst into laughter. Loud, wild, unhinged. It went on for far too long, long enough to make the moments feel absurd. Almost awkward. When he finally stopped, he stared into me with eyes that didn't feel like mine anymore. "I lived," he said, voice flat now. "You survived." Then he winked, a cruel, almost affectionate gesture, and without hesitation, he wrapped his hands around my throat. I didn't fight it. I didn't scream. I just let go. Let the breath leave my lungs. Let the world fade out. The life drained from my body, soaking silently into the carpet below. When my eyes opened again, I was back in the cafeteria. Same linoleum floor, same buzzing lights. Curled up on the floor, I watched my 9-year-old body convulsing on the tile. I tried to scream, tried to move, but all I could manage was a whisper. "Say no." It's all I ever managed to say. And still, without fail, the boy on the floor always says yes. Always. I've gone through this a few times now. Sometimes I think I've made it further. Sometimes I think maybe this is the time I break the cycle. But it always catches up to me. Right now, I'm writing this from inside my mom's house. It's warm, safe, smells like garlic bread and laundry detergent. I know what she's about to say. She says it every time, word for word. I'm really glad we've started doing this every month. It's brought me so much peace.